come on in. Have a seat. How are you going today? Yeah, no, that's okay. It's okay to be nervous. At any time, if you need to go over anything or you need me to clarify anything, that's fine. We've got a fair amount of time set aside today because going through the criteria for meeting an RPL assessment is quite lengthy and bulky. So in the document that we're using is the Save Training Assessment RPL Kit version 2. Did you bring that along with you today? Excellent. So we're just going to talk through the requirements of what you're going to need to be awarded RPL for called Making a Presentation, and it has the unit code BSBCMM401. Okay. So we'll just take our time working through this document. It's 15 pages, so it's quite hefty. If you need a break at all, need a drink, bathroom break, just a bit of time out to reflect, just let me know and we can absolutely do that. Anything you need, just let me know. We'll get started. So, in being awarded RPL, the 4 principles of assessment of being fair, valid, reliable and flexible are really important, but it's the 4 rules of evidence that we really rely on in being able to award a recognition of prior learning. So we need to make sure that the evidence you provide is valid, that it's sufficient, it's current, and that it's authentic, that it's been developed and used by you. And we'll talk about that further as we move through. The RPL toolkit just talks you through step by step of how we can work through to gain RPL. So there's an introduction there that you can read through. Oh, you've read it? Yeah. So there's 10 units that make up this qualification. And I know on the document it says there's a 4-step process, but you might notice there's actually 5 altogether. So step 1 is looking at, can I get an RPL in this unit? It's a quick 30-second eligibility check, so you don't waste time preparing evidence that'll only result in an unsuccessful claim. It saves you time, saves assessors time, saves participants time if you need to go in and do any further testing or presenting. Step 2 is the portfolio of evidence. Now this is going to be at the heart of your RPL claim, and it's your opportunity to put forward items of evidence and brief examples of experience that fit within the unit's requirements. Step 3 is getting someone to confirm it's true. Here you can simply get someone to verify your claims, and we'll talk about that as we move on through. Step 4, explain the gaps. Now, in a unit of competency, when you're applying for RPL, it's quite expected that there can be gaps. And this is just a way to work through what the gaps are and how you can fill them to become competent and receive recognition for prior learning. And the last step, step 5, is an interview, which is a professional conversation to confirm that your knowledge and experience meets the principles of assessment and the rules of evidence, and that the evidence you're providing is what you know about and is what you've provided yourself. So, looking at the unit of competency, make a presentation. We've got a quick 30-second checklist of what you should go through just to see if you could qualify for RPL. So, yes or no questions. Have you delivered a presentation in the last 12 months where there was a documented plan? In the last 12 months, have you used a presentation aid such as PowerPoint or a handout? And in the last 12 months, have you gathered feedback from your participants? Have you used a presentation aid or resource to supplement your presentation? And can you supply evidence that confirms all of the above? So there's no set volume of the amounts of evidence, but you need to address each of the components of the unit of competency with the evidence you supply to gain RPL. If you don't think you can supply all the evidence, we need to work on a review and not proceed with an RPL. So thinking about those questions, you've answered yes to all of those? Great. Okay, we'll proceed on to step 2, which is a portfolio of evidence. So we've got some tips for a better RPL experience in this unit. So show instead of tell. It's a very practical unit about making presentations to people. It might be easy to show a video or two of presentations that you've made in the past. You won't have to rely so much on documentation that way and detailed explanations. A video's quite easy as an example to mark you off on. And you should complete this unit after the TAE-DEL coded units. For example, TAE-DEL 401 and 402. If you've done those, you will most likely have evidence required for the RPL. I'm always here to have a chat with you about what kind of evidence to get and how to bulk up your claims and applications for recognition of prior learning. So there's some suggested evidence. So a video of a presentation, like we talked about, is a great resource. Presentation session plans that you've developed for presentations that you've made. Only previous presentation aids or materials or examples that you've used during a presentation are really good resources to bulk up your claim for RPL. And learner feedback forms are also really useful in assessing a group presentation. Can you think of any other evidence that you might want to include in a portfolio? Yeah. So an example provided here to you is a third-party assessment, and that's step 3. So getting someone that knows you've made these presentations, so a supervisor that's witnessed you make the presentations, it's a good tool to have to bolster your RPL claim. So just a third-party verification, and there's an example of that in your kit. So we move on to step 4, which is explaining the gaps. So this is the part where we pull apart the unit of competency and go through bit by bit to make sure each piece of evidence you're providing in your portfolio addresses every section of the unit of competency. Excuse me. So we'll go through now and break down the unit of competency. So the portfolio evaluation criteria. PC 1.1, plan and document presentation approach and the intended outcomes. PC 1.2, choose presentation strategies that match the characteristics of your target audience, location, resources and personnel needed. 1.3, performance criteria. Select presentation aids, materials and techniques that suit the format and purpose of your presentation, and it will enhance your audience's understanding of any key components and central ideas that you are presenting. PC 1.3, select presentation techniques that will suit the format and purpose of the presentation and will enhance the audience understanding of key concepts and central ideas. Performance criteria 1.4, brief others involved in the presentation of their roles and responsibilities within the presentation. Performance criteria 1.5, select techniques to evaluate the presentation effectiveness. So a good example of how to meet these criteria is in a presentation plan, where you can break down all those components and address that. So if you've made presentations before with presentation plans, they're a really excellent source of evidence that meet all those performance criteria. Now moving on to the performance criteria 2 of delivering a presentation. Performance criteria 2.1, explain and discuss desired outcomes for the presentation and the target audience. Performance criteria 2.2, use the presentation aids, materials and examples to support target audience understanding of key concepts and central ideas. Performance criteria 2.3, monitor non-verbal and verbal communication of participants to promote attainment of presentation outcomes. Performance criteria 2.4, use persuasive communication techniques to secure your audience's interest. PC 2.5, provide opportunities for participants to seek clarifications on central ideas and concepts and adjust the presentation to meet the needs and preferences of your participants. So a good form, like we discussed before, to meet all these performance criteria is a video recording of a previous presentation that you've delivered, and that can address in a simplified way that doesn't require a lot of documentation that you can meet all those criteria levels. Now, part 3 to look at in the performance criteria is review the presentation. So implement techniques to review the effectiveness of your presentation. PC 3.2, seek and discuss reactions to the presentation from participants or from key personnel involved in the presentation. And PC 3.3, utilize feedback from the audience or from key personnel. So when you go back and look through the presentations you've made previously, any participant feedback forms, any assessor feedback forms that have ticked you off signing off you as competent with making a presentation, they're all really good examples of evidence that you can use to say, yeah, I meet this criteria in the RPL. Now we're going to move on to portfolio evaluation criteria. This is looking at the foundation skills in the unit of competency. So reading, which is addressed in 1.1 to 1.3 and 2.2. Foundation skill, reviews and analyzes documents to identify information relevant to specific presentation. Writing, found in 1.1 and 3.3, develop material to convey ideas and information to a target audience that engages them. Oral communication, so the foundation and performance criteria 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6 and 3.2. The foundation skills addressed include presents information using words and non-verbal features appropriate to the audience and the context, as well as the foundation skill of uses listening and questioning techniques to gather information required to develop or modify presentations. A further foundation skill of interprets audience reactions and changes words or non-verbal features accordingly. So we'll move on to the next foundation skill, which is interact with others, which is found in performance criteria 2.1, 2.2, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6 and 3.2. So the foundation skill is selects and uses appropriate conventions and protocols to encourage interaction or to present information. Foundation skill demonstrates sophisticated control over oral, visual and written formats. Foundation skill utilizes a range of communication practices to achieve goals. And the foundation skill recognizes the need to alter personal communication styles in response to the needs and expectations of others. So this is pretty hefty, it's pretty full on. Do you need to take a break? Okay, you happy to continue? So we'll push on to the foundation skill of getting the work done. And this is found in the performance criteria 1.1 to 1.3, 2.2, 2.5 and 3.2. So the foundation skill uses the main features and functions of digital tools to complete work tasks. Uses feedback from others, analytical and lateral thinking to review current practice and develop new ideas. And then we've got a checklist of the portfolio evaluation criteria. So the assessment requirements. So it's a short checklist to see if we can move on to the next part of the unit of competency. So your performance evidence, deliver presentations related to occupation or an area of interest, and demonstrate the use of effective presentation strategies and communication principles. So our knowledge evidence we're drawing from the unit of competency is principles of effective communication and a range of presentation aids and materials available to support presentations. So basically, like we said, videos, any previous PowerPoint presentations you may have made, on presentations you've made before that you'd like to submit. You can go through that checklist point by point, and during your video just check off that you're meeting all those criteria, because to proceed with your application for the RPL we need that evidence. So it might include more than one video of a presentation you previously made. It might include PowerPoint presentations, like printouts of the slides you've made, or videos of the presentation itself in the PowerPoint format, but we need evidence that we can really bolster our 4 rules of evidence, so we can tick off the RPL and award you recognition of prior learning. So that's when we go back through, when you find the gaps that you might not have met any of these processes, and that's a good time to come and meet with me again, and we can go through each of the gaps and work on how we can work to gain some evidence to close those gaps to support your claim for RPL. So for each of the components of your checklist that you've selected no for, we need to provide an explanation of the gaps or an example of how you do this work at work. So it might make more sense to meet when you go through each of those components. Look at different examples of evidence you want to use in your portfolio, and then we can troubleshoot that to close any of the gaps and work on what we need to do to support your submission. And then when we're confident that you've met all the components of all the areas of the unit of competency, and that we've found enough valid, sufficient, current and authentic evidence, we'll move on to the interview. And basically it's just going to be a casual interview. We can have it verbally, it could be face-to-face, we could do a Skype interview, we could talk on the phone. We can work with whatever way you feel comfortable to present your level of understanding to be assessed as competent in the RPL. So the interview process is outlined there under step 5. So a competent person will be able to speak comfortably about their experience. So in applying for RPL, we expect that you'd have made a number of presentations, and then you'll be quite comfortable talking about the presentations you've made and how you've addressed each component of the unit of competency. To successfully complete the interview task, you must participate in an interview. Like I said, we're pretty flexible in how we complete this assessment, whether it's verbally, on the phone, on Skype. But you must provide satisfactory responses to the following questions. The answers relate to your experience in planning, organising and delivering group-based learning under a range of conditions. So each presentation there might be different group dynamics, different amount of people you're presenting to. There might be a variability in the knowledge that each participant has. Some people might be quite experienced in what you're talking about. Some people might be quite novice. And they'll all go to support your claim for RPL. The questions that I ask will be directly in the context of the skills that you've demonstrated and supplied evidence for. The point of the interview is to be casual and relaxed, and it's designed to give you a fair opportunity to really discuss and demonstrate your experience and understanding with giving presentations. I'm not going to ask you anything that's outside of what's listed in the unit of competency, and it's not a test, it's really just a conversation between two professionals. As we move through, the assessor, which is me, will stop the conversation and move on to the next question when you've provided sufficient information to answer the question, whether it's satisfactory or not. I'm not going to have you feel the pressure that you've got to deliver more and more and more when you've actually given me just the right amount. And if I can see that you're struggling in a particular area, or you're not going to quite get the answer that I need, we can move on, and we can always come back to that if you get new ideas as the interview progresses. At any time you can seek clarification on any question. I can not give you hints or answers, but I can clarify and rephrase within reason to help you come to the right answer. If you provide insufficient but accurate information initially, the assessor will inform you that your response is insufficient and you need to elaborate. So I just need a bit more to get over the line. And I might ask you a few more questions that probe you or make you think a little bit more, and maybe how to answer the question in a different way, just to make sure that the answer's sufficient. At the end of the interview, I'll provide you with feedback talking about your areas of strength, areas where satisfactory responses were given but we need a bit more further development of knowledge or understanding. If there is a specific question that's not answered satisfactorily, I'll give you an explanation for why. And you're welcome to prepare for the interview by taking notes on each question with you. The interview will be conducted by a voice call, video call, or in person as appropriate, and will be at a mutually agreed time. And you should allow up to an hour for the interview to take place. Then when we've worked through your RPL toolkit, I'll go through and we'll go through each of the outcomes. So I'll provide you with an RPL assessment that breaks down each component of the unit of competency, the evidence that you've provided to show that you can meet that area of the unit, and then we put an outcomes checklist. So the checklist includes that the candidate has been involved in determining the RPL approach, that you agree to how we're approaching the RPL. The RPL assessment was conducted in accordance with the principles of assessment, so they are fair, valid, reliable and flexible, that there was sufficient evidence on which to base the assessment decision, so the rules of evidence being valid, sufficient, current and authentic, that there's sufficient evidence on which to base the assessment decision. I'm accountable for the decision that I make in awarding competency or not yet competency in this recognition of prior learning assessment. So to continue, we're making sure all the evidence that you've collated is current. We're verifying that all the evidence is authentic. We're verifying that all critical aspects of the evidence were collected. And then we deem you, hopefully, RPL granted for making presentations using oral communication. And I'll provide you with some feedback and any recommendations for further training that you might find useful. And then we'll both sign and date that off. Okay, are there any questions at this stage you'd like to ask? Did you jot down any notes while we were going through that? Okay. Excellent. So it might be a good idea now to go through your documentation, your videos, all the different types of evidence that you have. You might have lots of evidence, and if that's the case, sort of culling what shows that you meet the unit of competency the best. So if there was a presentation where you might have missed a few things, but then there was another presentation video you've got where you absolutely nailed it, include the one where you nailed it. Hopefully you've got enough evidence that the culling process is easy for you. Like I said, you can contact me anytime, and I look forward to working with you. Bye.